So we'll be going on record. Time now is 12:09. Apologize for the lateness of the start of the meeting. This is the May 2015 meeting of the Public Safety Committee. Paul Honeman chairing the committee, and with me are two other members.
And your microphone works, man.
Elvie Gray Jackson.
Dave Trainee, Anchorage Assembly.
Okay, very good. So we normally, of course, would hear from the department heads and under public safety. So Chief Mew, I notice, is here. Do you have anything? And Chief Fanning, Deputy Chief Fanning. So
we started a new academy on Monday. We had 20 new recruits. So that's good news. Puts us up to 368 sworn.
Mr. Chairman?
We couldn't hear you.
The mics work? Because that might be, yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman, through the chair.
Thank you.
I guess you are the chair, though, in this committee. We started a new police academy on Monday, 0800 Monday morning, 20 new recruits.
20?
That brings our sworn numbers up to 368. On paper, that's 2 away from being fully staffed. So that's good news. And we're going to have ongoing attrition, so we're still planning another academy for the fall. So I don't know how much else you want to talk about right now. I know we've got some agenda items that are coming up. So do you have other questions for us in the general way?
Let me check to see Ms. Gray Jackson, Mr. Trainee.
You started out with 23 in this class, wasn't it, Chief? Or I thought I heard number 23 to begin with. We end up at 20.
There's been different snapshots. There was a time when we thought we'd have 28, but we only made 20 job offers in the end, and all 20 accepted.
Okay. How big is this next class going to be? Do we have any idea on the projection for the October class?
Some of that we won't know until we see how many positions open up between now and then. But we do know we don't know yet, but you guys will have the opportunity to approve a grant here shortly. I don't know if it's going to make Tuesday's meeting or not. If it is, it'll be a late arrival, so it may be the next meeting after that. But we're receiving a grant that would add 6 sworn and 1 non-sworn PCN to our budget. So that would be 6 new, that would add on to whatever we do in the fall by 6. And then whatever else we do in the fall would be whatever openings we've got or whatever double filling that we might do at the last minute to try and get ahead of whatever attrition we expect at the end of the year. So that's really a moving target. We won't really know until we see how that shapes up, but blurring my eyes and kind of going with what the averages are, I'll bet we're shooting for a full academy.
Chief, you said 6 grants are coming down, or 1 grant for 6 officers?
Correct.
Who's the grant from?
The State Highway Safety Office.
Any ties into it?
It will stand up a dedicated OUI unit of 6 officers, 1 sergeant, and a clerk. And it is, our only match is we're picking up the IGCs. The other conditions are we can't supplant the budget with it, but there's no obligation to keep the program going whenever the grant funding runs out. Okay. At that point, the city can decide whether to fund it itself or say it was great, but we're going to absorb.
How long is the grant for?
A couple $1 million bucks.
No, 3 years or 1 year? Or what?
It's year by year, but we're only guaranteed the first year, but the discussions are in the neighborhood of 3 years anyway. So I'm reasonably sure we have it for 3 years.
Thank you, Chief.
So first of all, I apologize for the background noise. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. The background noise, we may move next month's meeting depending on how retrofitting is going. So Ms. Gray Jackson. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Trainee asked most of the questions that I had, but I know what UI means. What's the O stand for? OUI unit.
Drunk driving.
But what's the O stand for?
Oh, operating under the influence.
Okay, that's a new
They
term.
as soon as we get comfortable with an acronym, they change it on us.
I figured under human, under an I influence, but I had never seen operating before. So anyway, it's a new term for me anyway. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And I'll say it, probably we'll cover it again in a bit, but I just wanted to acknowledge, thanks to the School Resource Officer Program, again, proving its value with the assault on the bicyclist on the trail. And apparently, my understanding is the SROs were able to work with the school district in trying to identify these youngsters that were on the trail.
Well, I think there are three prongs to this, but the resource officers were a very important part. I mean, the patrol officer who handled this thing worked hard for 48 hours to pull this off, but he got support from the SROs who were able to go to the schools, figure out who cut class today, and get those descriptions and work with the principal to get them ID'd, and then it was the detectives who worked on the interviews and rounding out the evidence.
Well, good job. It was, obviously it's bike to work day to day, so I'm sure you probably bike to work. So in any event, it's something that I know is fairly random in the sense that didn't seem to be a planned event, but it's, glad to get somebody apprehended, and hopefully they'll be held accountable for it.
Yeah, we're quite happy that we were able to get that done. That upset everybody, including us.
Thanks, Chief. Anything else? No. Chief Fullenwider, up. No. Chief Drozik's here.
Good afternoon, Chief Fullenwider. Apologize for not being able to make it today, so I'll be a stand-in.
Very good.
Not much to report. We do have the Recruit Academy of 14 graduating. That'll be Thursday at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. at the Fire Training Center. So we just finished 2 nights, 2 full shifts with them, what we call shift day. I don't know if you saw the black smoke over by Merrifield the last couple of days, but we put them through, we run them through a whole shift prior to actually coming on duty. So they get to see what it's like. They run through cardiac arrest, man downs, actual structure fires, water problems, everything, a whole gamut of all the things that we may respond to. And then we finish it off with what they call Beirut night, where they light about 6 vehicles on fire and some dumpsters, and lets the crews get out there and practice all the skills they learned. So that went well. As you know, Station 3, we did the groundbreaking for that last week. Thank you all for showing up for that. And we have Station 9 is tentatively scheduled for June 10th. More dates and times to follow along with that, though. And in the...
Okay. Anything for Chief Bigelow?
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that the only reason why I wasn't at the groundbreaking was because I was out of town. So otherwise I would have been there.
I did miss you, so...
You did?
We'll see you at the next one.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Trainee, in June 10th, will you be available for the groundbreaking at Station 9?
No, I fly out of here on the 9th, right at the end of our meeting that night.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be there.
Okay. We'll have a shovel for you. I'll throw a couple scoops for you guys.
Do that. We'll probably have Cher show up, and she can get 2 shovels, one for each hand, and throw it. Thank you.
All right,
Health
thanks.
Department, Ms. Freeman. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I'll try to speak in between the jackhammers. So we have been very busy at the Health Department. Last week, we participated in an exercise with the state of Alaska and our partners at AFD and APD, JBER and the hospitals. It was a full-scale exercise in response to dispensing medications in the event of a bioterrorism attack, and we learned a lot from that process. It is our task at the Health Department to dispense medications within 48 hours to over 300,000 people. We're able to do that through our various partners, JBER and the hospitals, et cetera. The exercise went very well. We learned a lot, and we were able to accomplish our task. We have to submit all that information to FEMA to make sure that we're doing what we're tasked to do within the municipality. So thumbs up on that. Of course, Bike to Work Day, we're a very active and leadership partner in that. And in addition to that, we're probably asked to be placed on your agenda the food code changes, as well as making sure that we continue to inform the Public Safety Committee about the proposed food code changes in case you all have questions. And we continue with our community meetings and our partners in moving forward with the food code changes. In addition, we have been asked to provide input when necessary on the marijuana regulation interpretations, and I've asked Tony Barrett, our environmental and health supervisor here today, in case you have any specific questions that we can answer related to food or edibles connected to marijuana regulations.
Mr. Trainee, did you have, I know you had some issues in reference to the... Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I just wanted to thank you for, I know you were at the last meeting when the gentleman came and talked at the open invitation to speak at the public hearing. segment of our last meeting, last scheduled meeting, I guess you
Yes.
say, talking about smoking of marijuana in apartments. And so
Right.
I think Mr. Trainee might have some information he's looking at.
I'm working on an ordinance relative to marijuana in apartments.
Okay,
We've looked across this country, and some jurisdictions do deal with marijuana in apartments because it's a closed environment. Usually in a building that's got more than 2 apartments. So in the next month, you'll see the ordinance coming forward. We'll send it to you guys to get your comments.
okay, thank you.
I think
Now, I do have an ordinance coming forward, probably laid on the table on the 26th, to treat marijuana smoke as tobacco smoke. You know the ordinance we have relative to tobacco smoke. I want the same thing to apply to marijuana smoke, because if you're allergic to tobacco smoke, you're definitely going to be allergic to marijuana smoke. So the same prohibitions we've got now, we'd want to continue for marijuana usage.
We'll be happy to have our experts respond and assist you with that.
We should be introducing it at this next meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Any questions?
Your code, you're saying you got this new food code coming in Florida?
Yes, we've been, our team has been working on it for, gosh, the last year or so. And Tony Barrett, our supervisor, is here if you have any questions about the
When are you
process.
planning on it coming in front of the assembly is my only question to you.
Pardon?
When would you plan on it coming in front of the assembly?
I'll ask Tony to come up.
Sure. And I think that's something that the Alaska hospitality retailers have also been working with the administration on that.
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, the earliest date would be in August, and it could be later than that, but that's as early as it would come before the
Just when
assembly.
you've got it done, get a hold of my clerk, Barbara, and get her to set up a work session on it, because I want the whole assembly, rather than individual questions, I want to come in front of the whole assembly, so let's set up about an hour and a half work session, okay?
Yes,
As soon
sir.
as it's ready to go, let us know. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And OEM, Mr. Spillers, do we have anybody from emergency management? I don't see. Okay. Normally, Kevin is usually here. It goes on. All right, so we're moving into the new business agenda items. And the first is AMC 2150-500A1, referencing assembly approval of a restaurant or eating place license for beer and wine. Actually, I think what we have before us is, I think Mr. Coffey is here on behalf of the petitioner. We had postponed it as a result of some code changes. Mr. Weaver may have some information about proposed, as well as the application for AK Alchemist. And I know Mr. Trainee and I were there just yesterday looking at the business at 4th and A Street.
Nice artwork.
And very nice mural inside. So referencing that, Jamie, do you have the actual ordinance reference that particular license petition?
I did not bring the ordinance.
Okay, I didn't either, but if we could perhaps, Mr. Trainee, or Mr. Coffey, did you by chance have a copy of that petition with you? Or
Well, I have an original, I don't have copies.
No worries.
No, I was going to be
if
provided.
you'd like to step forward and just kind of explain on behalf of the petitioner what we're up against, I guess. It's something new. We haven't done it before. That's
Yes, that's absolutely correct, which is part of the reason I wanted to be involved when they asked if I could work on this, because it's sort of a hybrid situation we have. These are not building structures in the sense that we are familiar with. But the question becomes, and this is the basic question, is are mobile food carts eligible, I think would be the best way to say, to also be serving beer and wine with meals. And that question requires the focus of, I believe requires the focus, because of course my client is the first one to bring themselves forward. And so my suggestion is that in the context of the code, and the existing code and the says, refers to requirements imposed by the assembly in more than one place. It does it in 500A1 and 500A2. But basically what you have with a land use approval for this kind of thing is you can put a host of conditions on it, just as you do with a conditional use. So rather than, my view is this, of course I'm an advocate for a guy who's an applicant, but my view is that you ought to look at the establishment that's there and whether or not that can be made to be safe, number one, appropriate use, number two, and there's a whole host of factors that goes into that decision, so that the answer shouldn't necessarily be, no, none of these qualify. It should be, well, let's look at them each in a particular fashion. And of course, I would suggest that there are attributes of the one on 4th and A that would argue in favor of this, and there are conditions that you should put on any approval that you do in fact give that would ensure that the safety concerns and the public interest concerns are properly addressed. And I suggest a couple of things, and we need to have more detail, but my suggestion would be, for example, since this might be the first one, limit the land use permit to 1 year. It expires unless renewed. So you get an opportunity to look at it for a period of time. A year is nothing magical, maybe 18 months, maybe 6 months, I don't know, but you have the authority to do that. And then there's a host of other conditions and requirements that you could put on the use of the site as part of the land use, and then that all falls within your bailiwick. You don't have to go to the ABC board. Your land use permit permits it or denies it, as the case may be, and down the road you go. And what I would propose we do, if that concept is acceptable, then we would submit to you or the Public Safety Committee or to the full body and to, of course, to staff, we would submit a detailed site plan development that would demonstrate things that we're thinking about, and I don't want to get into all the details today, but there's a host of things you could do that would make it, I believe, would address the concerns that I've heard so far.
Okay. Mr. Trainer, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions for Mr. Coffey, but I would really appreciate hearing from the planning department and seeing what they have to say about this idea. It's a pretty innovative idea, but I really want to hear from planning, probably Erica, who's the planning supervisor, correct? I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this, if it's okay.
Mr. Coffey, we may call you back up to ask some.
Oh, sure, that's fine. I'm here for the whole time.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. McConnell or Mr. Weaver, either one, or both. I'm going to look, while you're talking, I'm going to look and see if I can find the actual agenda item with request. But just so you know, for my colleagues, again, Ms. Trainee and I went yesterday, but it's essentially a Connex box that was converted, and it's and you guys can help us with the dimensions on the lot, but it's literally right across from the fire station at north side of 4th Avenue on A. And it's situated what I would consider to be on a temporary basis, but and that may be one of my questions that I would have, so I'll just, for that.
Mr. Chairman, Assembly members, Jerry Weaver, Director of Community Development, Erica McConnell as well. Basically, when we first started with these mobile food carts and the coffee carts, they were meant to be a temporary kind of use in an interim basis, and the requirements basically were for electrical connection. They had to get a permit for electrical connection through building safety. There was no sewer and water connections. A few of them have morphed into that over the years. Some of these mobile food carts have sewer and water connections, one or both. This one has both. What my point was that initially these were meant to be in an interim use until, sometimes the properties had excess capacity in their parking lots and didn't interfere with the required parking establishments there were brick and mortar facilities there with paved parking, landscaping, etc. But the majority of them were placed there on an interim basis, and no required parking, no paving, no landscaping, etc. This particular, we don't see that beer and wine license for these types of facilities would be appropriate land use, because they are not meant for occupancy. They're not constructed for occupancy. Say, for example, like a building would be, to have public occupancy inside. So that would leave you to dispensing it out the side window, which I don't think that that's probably what the Assembly intended when we originally looked at these. This particular one with the Connex, was permitted as a mobile food cart, not a structure. And to actually have people inside the structure would require a building permit. And absent a building permit, it would be problematic to have beer and wine license in the facility.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And so, Mr. Trainee, anything? So, have you been back on site since they've, I guess, opened for business, Mr. Weaver?
Excuse me?
Have you been at the site since they opened for business?
Many people have visited the site.
Okay. Yesterday, as I went in, there's a porch, handrail, and you walk in, and I think there's seating for 5 or 6 people at a counter kind of thing. And so you can actually walk inside and place your order and do your pickup from there. Even though it's not the, I guess you could say, brick and mortar structure, it's a full metal container that's structurally sound, I would say. Bob Kniefel, the building official, is here if you want to speak to the issues with respect to structure, but we're basically waiting for this process to go through the assembly. We figured we would have a full discussion and a debate on the topic. We didn't want to rush to judgment to close a facility down until the discussion had taken place, but it's operating as if it were a structure with a building permit. Okay. Mr. Train?
Jerry, how many of these temporary buildings have actually morphed into brick and structured building? I mean, there's little coffee shacks all over town. They've been there for 20, 30 years, and they don't really morph into anything else other than what they are.
You have a couple of different types. You've got some that are actually vehicles that are mobile food carts. The one down with 3rd and 4th merged together, it's a Mexican place that is, I believe, a vehicle that has internal occupancy. You have 2 or 3 other coffee carts that have connected to public utilities. Some have paving, some are ancillary to a full brick and mortar facility that doesn't, impede the parking, the required parking of those facilities. So there are a few.
But would you agree that the majority of them stay as temporary buildings permanently?
Mr. Chair, I think, that's something we haven't looked for the ancillary use to a brick and mortar facility. That might be an appropriate accessory use that it certainly doesn't harm and it certainly provides service to the public. It's the facilities that are on an interim basis on a lot that's not developed, no brick and mortar, no paving for parking, no landscaping provisions, that those truly are an interim type of use until the supply and demand meets up with the need to construct a brick and mortar facility on that property.
I've seen a lot of them over the years that have propane or gas in there, but they don't seem to have water. Either drinkable water is brought into them by truck and pumped in, or gray water that's pumped out of there. It seems like they've adapted their building to permanently meet that system of doing business. I'm just wondering, does the city have anything to entice them to become a brick and mortar building, or are we just going to let them continue on the way they are?
We really haven't fully addressed that issue, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
So I guess I'll ask either Mr. Weaver, Ms. McConnell, either one. So we're dealing with the 4 items that are on this new business, A through D, and so you're saying that you've held off the final, I guess, review to determine what the code change that is being brought forth. There's no position other than you're saying that you don't think this is an appropriate place for beer and wine license approval?
We don't believe it's appropriate to have public occupancy in the mobile food facility. That to have public occupancy in accordance with Title 23, it has to be constructed appropriately, and that means with a building permit. this particular development started out and was approved as a mobile food cart. It morphed into something bigger. It has an HVA system in there. It has a commercial grade range hood in there. Has propane, has an outside bathroom that you access from the outside of the building. The entrance into the facility doesn't meet ADA requirements. It has a lot of issues.
Mr. Trainee?
But Erica can address the other issues in the ordinance.
Mr. Jerry, just as it relates to mobile, how mobile is this building? Because
We required
looks
the
like it's-
applicant to
everything
give
other
us
than the wheels being cut off from underneath it.
Originally, what happened, so you all know, is that it's a Connex, and for it to become, actually to be a mobile food cart, it had to have an axle and a tongue. So the person, the property owner, did those things, and they got a registration and title from the state of Alaska as a trailer. So it legitimately was permitted as a mobile food cart.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I just, Ms. McConnell, I don't know if you can address this or not, but, I've looked around and I'm kind of fascinated by the idea, the creativity, I guess you'd say. There are people that have built homes. I'm not sure about businesses, but I know I saw this in-depth one that actually took them a couple of years to finish it, but the guy he was an engineer or architect, and he engineered his own using the real high-top Connexes, and he built a home. It's actually, if you Google it, you can find it. I can't remember the name of the guy, but it's a pretty creative use of a pretty solid structure, I think. But I guess I'm relying on you to say, are we at that point where we need to be looking at using these Connexes for other purposes or repurposing? We, as you know, the lots downtown, I understand, are pretty narrow. Those particular lots are like 50-foot widths.
Mr. Chairman, it is a solid structure, but if it were a structure, it would be on a foundation, which this facility is not.
So then, what you're saying, if I hear you right, is that if they required or requested a building permit, lifted the darn thing, and put some sort of foundation underneath it, should it be approved, that it changes the scope of it?
And we discussed this with the applicant about 2 weeks ago, that they could either be permitted as a mobile food cart or a structure. It's their choice. But should they apply for a building permit, it would be reviewed against Title 23, the requirements of Title 23, and those include foundation, seismic, and the whole thing.
So it looks like we're in new territory, and so that's where we're hoping to get guidance from. And of course, the petitioners are coming in with a different idea, obviously, and how their business model looks. But
Erica could speak to the ordinance, to clean up ordinance for the process.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to address items A and D on the agenda. During the review of this situation, we discovered that there had been a code change in 2007 that we had not been fully implementing. Prior to 2007, all retail sales of alcohol were considered a conditional use that came forward to the Assembly. And as you know, the process works that the state ABC board lets the municipality know that there's been, I'm just going to speak about new licenses, I'm not going to speak about transfers or renewals, but that there's been a new liquor license request. The Assembly protests the license request, conditioning removal of that protest upon satisfying a number of requirements, one of which is a land use review. And then that protest states that once all of these conditions are satisfied, the municipal clerk can administratively lift the protest. And so once the conditions are satisfied, the clerk lets the ABC board know that the municipality no longer has an issue with the license application, and then the ABC board can issue the license. So in 2007, there was a code change that said if it's a license that is just a request for a restaurant to serve beer and wine on the premises, the land use review portion of that doesn't need to come to the Assembly as a conditional use. It can be reviewed and approved administratively at the planning department level. We still think that's a great idea, but the catch is that the ordinance said that the assembly has to not protest the license before the land use review can take place, which in our opinion is a little bit of putting the cart before the horse, that the assembly would not have the benefit of seeing the land use review and whether there are any problems raised through the land use review before telling the state, we have no problems with issuing this license. So we haven't been doing that. We've been doing the land use review before the assembly's protest is lifted, and that's not in accordance with what the code says to do. So the ordinance that I believe was introduced at the last meeting and will be up at the next meeting changes it to be consistent with how conditional uses that come to the assembly are treated, so that the assembly will protest the issuance of a new license, even if it's a beer wine license. Then there'll be a land use review, and if they satisfy, if the land use review doesn't raise any issues, then the protest can be lifted administratively, similar to a package store license or a full bar license, that sort of thing. Did that make sense?
I think so, and so specifically, I see where the bracketed items are coming out, and then, of course, the underline is the one that should be coming in.
Correct.
Okay. And so, any questions? And this is, Chairman, you know if this item is coming on our next agenda? Is it scheduled for our public hearing on this coming?
I believe so, but I'm not positive.
Very good. What position does this particular ordinance have as it relates to the application from the ACAL?
So we processed the land use review, the administrative site plan review for Alaska Alchemist, and we denied them their administrative site plan review to have beer and wine at their facility. And they decided to appeal. The code gives appeal rights that they can appeal the director's decision to the assembly. And so as we were working with the Department of Law and the clerk's office on, and this, by the way, would be the first time that an administrative site plan review for a beer and wine license has ever been denied, and also the first time one has ever been appealed. So as we were working with the Department of Law and the clerk's office to figure out how that process goes forward, because nobody's ever done it before, the language got a closer look, and we saw, oh, we're not even allowed to do the administrative site plan review until after the assembly's protest of the license has been lifted. The protest, which I believe was Assembly Resolution 59, the protest said it was protested for 3 reasons: needing the land use review, the administrative site plan review, issues relating to the building safety department, and issues relating to the fire department. So essentially, we voided our denial because we can't even do the land use review until after the building safety and fire issues are resolved. Then the protest is administratively lifted, the state issues the license to the applicant, and then we do a land use review. And so I don't know what the next step would be after that, because if our concern is allowing beer and wine to be sold at a mobile food unit, which this is what Alaska Alchemist is permitted for, and the planning department feels that that's inappropriate and we deny it, they already have their license from the state. So I think that leaves us in a very confusing situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, Mr. Coffey, I guess I'd have a question of you, if it's possible, if you're available to answer.
I spoke with Dennis Wheeler when I first got into this matter, and the circular nature of the statute is such that they're precluded, and you don't want to lift your protest until this thing is approved. So the amendment to the ordinance is appropriate, whether the actual language is specific or not, and if I have any problems with that, I would voice it. I just wanted to put one other thought in front of you. The majority of the traffic at this location is in this nature. I made this inquiry. In the morning hours, at going to work time, the drive-in window is used substantially. People are buying a cup of coffee mostly. By 11 at the latest, and probably earlier, that sort of traffic ceases, and the bulk of the traffic at this location is food service, and it's mostly pedestrian. Now, we've got situations as we move east on 4th Avenue we're moving into areas which are old, deteriorated, substantially in need of business and activity, and a lot of the people who frequent this place, I'm advised, are tourists who are mostly on foot. And it's one block on the other side, it's on the other side of 4th Avenue and A Street, pardon me, it's on 4th, it's on the other side of the street. To the degree that we can enhance traffic up and down east side of downtown, I think we advantage ourselves, and particularly foot traffic at a place like this. There are no curb cuts, you got to drive onto the place from the alley. So there are site conditions that mitigate against some of the concerns voiced, and there are also the fact that the improvement of our ability to service tourists and move our effective business economy to the east argue in favor of something like this, dependent upon how you guys can protect the public and serve the needs of the community. So I just wanted you to understand the nature of the business a little better, and as I said in my first opportunity to talk to you is that if you're interested in a detailed site plan review that addresses what we understand are the concerns that have been voiced previously, we will do that and present that as appropriate, either here or at the Assembly.
Mr. Training.
Mr. Chairman, just to the schedule, is item 14F. Paul?
Excuse me?
It's item 14F on our agenda for the 26th.
I apologize. Thank you, sir. I was answering a question.
Oh, you mean at the Assembly, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew that, yeah.
There's no other business in front of us, so we're going to move through that relatively quickly.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Okay.
Mr. Coffey, I know you're just representing the owner group here.
It's the Blomfelds, and it's Alaska Alchemist.
I don't know if either of the parties' petitioners are here.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if either of the participants or principals are here.
No. In fact, one of them is in. I forget. One was out. Oh, one of them is actually fishing out of state, shrimping, and the other one was due back late last night from a trip in Juneau. But I don't know if she made it back or not.
Good. So here's my question, and I'll ask this back at the department too for the administration and to it. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I certainly can appreciate particularly the east end of 4th Avenue from A Street east towards the McKay Building, or what we now know as the towers there, inlet towers. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not opposed wholeheartedly for something new, but I also understand some of the concerns that are being stated from the department's perspective, and I'm not sure how to clarify. If I'm hearing right, I'm hearing that this was a made application as a food cart, walk-up or drive-through for the window, much like you see at the coffee stands next to Totem Theater, and they're all over the town.
Yes, they are.
But nobody typically, I've walked up to a couple of them. I'll be the first to say the one by the Rainmaker Car Wash. I can't even remember the hot spot or something. Anyway, I've walked up there when I was washing a car and parked and then walked over and got one. But in any event, this does present a different model. So walking up and going inside the actual as a business and then sitting at a counter would suppose that this would be a structural kind of thing. It's not necessarily the food cart that we see as typical. Yeah. So I guess the issue of ADA compliance, would that be on this? I saw the plan drawing, like with lines on the outside of it, like a deck. Would that be where ADA would come into play, like a ramp or something?
Probably have to. I haven't asked that question, but I understand the necessity of it. But by the way, the new Title 21 does not prohibit occupancy. It prohibits seating inside. You can go in, and many of these mobile food carts, you do go in and pick up your food. You don't have to, you're not precluded from being on it, you're precluded from having seats in it. Now, the wisdom of that code section, we can deliberate, but the point is, that's what it says. So what I have been told is that the policy has been to require people to have a building permit and build according to the building code as a condition of having public occupancy. Well, frankly, I don't care what the policy is. What I care about is what the law says and the regulations say. And if there is going to be that kind of a law or regulation, then it ought to be adopted as such. And frankly, policies are not my favorite thing. I kind of like this, an ordinance or a regulation, not what something is adopted without any public opportunity. So, and it's a legitimate question. I don't debate the fact that it's a legitimate question, but, so, and again, you have two choices. You can just say no to this, or you can say, well, here we have something that's clearly an attractive Connex, better looking than any other one I've ever seen. And there's an opportunity here for an entrepreneur to serve the public. How do we do it in an appropriate fashion that recognizes both the public interest and the interest of the business? And if you can arrive at something that satisfies those two concerns, is there harm in looking at it? I don't think so. We need to be somewhat innovative in this town in a lot of ways, because that's what builds our tax base and our business community. And if you can't arrive at a conclusion that there's an effective and appropriate way to do it, you turn it down. So, but let's get to the heart of it and not just tie ourselves around some amorphous policy and unreality. Does it help us? Does it help our community or not? And it's our responsibility to show you that it is. You know, it creates employment, it helps serve our tourists, it moves our city to the east in terms of an effective business community, and on and on and on. And if we can carry that burden, then I think you guys ought to give it consideration. If we can't, turn thumbs down. And I get it.
Mr. Trainee? Ms. Grajak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question to planning, not Mr. Coffey.
I'm sorry, you were looking at what, ma'am?
No.
Question of
Thank you,
planning.
Mr. Coffey. I have a question from planning.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, for being up here this afternoon. But anyway, my basic question is what they want to do legal? That's the bottom line for me.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackson, it's not a policy. Title 23 is prescriptive and requires, when you have internal occupancy, to meet the building code requirements.
Right, and Title 23 is part of the municipal code, therefore it's law.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So my question is, I'm trying to get my head around this. I understand structure, and I understand mobile food cart. And I'm looking at this thing as a bit different. It's not sitting on a wheels with a skirt around it like the mobile food carts or hot. Well, Vinny's Food Wagon is in a big van, a box van, okay? And they're cooking out of it, and I've stepped inside the darn thing to order my food. Now, I can't sit there and eat it or drink anything because it's too crowded, it's too doggone hot. But I've been in there, and it's a mobile, and it clearly is a food truck, if you will. I've never given it much thought whether or not if they put a deck out right beside it or a canopy and said this is for patrons only, is that allowed?
A lot of us have been in that, Mr. Honeman, in that facility, but it hasn't been analyzed to see exactly how it fits in. It's somewhere, in between the mobile food cart. It truly is a vehicle that can move from place to place, and we have them operating on the public streets as well. So some are semi-fixed, permanent, like Benny's, and some are actual mobile on the streets, and then we have these quote term of mobile food cart that are pretty much not mobile, that are what you see as a coffee carts. From our perspective, the way it was permitted as a mobile food cart, that's the way it should operate until they apply for something else, and that something else would be a building permit.
So, and then I'm going to get back to that, if you don't mind. Bear with me. I'm just asking because this is why they were scheduled for the part of the agenda. I'm going back to if Benny's example decided to set a deck up, that you step off to their truck and moved into a deck area or a canopy and applied then for like put picnic tables or some benches and seats and then applied for a beer and wine license, would that be something that the building department would think would be sufficient for the issue?
We haven't analyzed that, but that's somewhat of a different animal because it is a vehicle. It does have a motor in it. It can move, but it's somewhat semi-permanent there too, because it doesn't move. But no one's asked for that consideration, so I don't think there's been any internal thought about that.
Okay. But under the code, would it be allowed? Or could it be allowed?
As a vehicle with a motor, to have public occupancy inside the vehicle?
No, canopy or deck.
Canopy and deck, and, possibly.
Because that's kind of what they're proposing here is a deck area. I don't think they're...
Well, their fixed plan shows seating inside this facility.
So if the seating weren't inside the facility, it would change things?
It would be a little bit of a different story.
Okay. I'm trying to get my head around what makes this fit or what it doesn't make it fit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing else. You have anything? So this matter will be back before the body on the 26th, Mr. Chair. Is that right?
Item 14. Mr. Holman.
Thank you. Mr. Koff, is there anything that you'd like to say further? I don't know if there's anything more clarification. I would say the input to the petitioners, to the assembly as a body, because we'll have that, and obviously yourself or someone, or maybe they'll be here.
Oh, they'll be with us then, yeah. Mhm. I have nothing further today. It is an assembly matter, the full body, and Tuesday on the 26th, right?
Absolutely, Mr. Coffey.
Yeah. Well, my only question then would be, will the new ordinance and all of that stuff be wrapped all around that so we know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? And
Is 20, Mr. Chief, you've got your hand raised. Is that, you have an answer on that?
I have a question.
Oh, question. Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask.
Absolutely. I no problem. First question is, Jamie, do you know if 2015-57, is that also on the agenda? Will that be something before?
That's the item that's in front of us.
Yeah.
So both 57 and 59 will be heard on the 26th?
59 will be on the consent agenda.
No, we postponed it.
AR.
I think what you have to do is you've got to delay the action on 59, take action on 57, then you can come back and address 59. If 59 is on the consent agenda.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Please.
Okay, I'm looking at 2015-59, and I believe what you and Mr. Traynor are saying, but the only reason why I said what I said is because there's a stamp here that says Clerk's Office approved 3/3/2015. So, anyway. So this is
Because mine doesn't.
okay. This is 59.
I know what I'm saying is.
Yeah, this one is.
This one is 50, this is 14 now.
But this one.
That's on consent agenda.
So if you want to
I think
explain.
at the last moment we held that one.
Ms. Gray Jackson, I think we have an answer from the clerks. So she's got one document here I'll show as an S version to the 59, and then she's also, Ms. Hines, please.
The S version was put forth on the 28th, I believe.
Of April.
And it's an S version of AR 59, and it strikes the requirement for the administrative site plan review, since we found out that that did not comply with code. On the 28th, you adopted AR 2015-156, which essentially took the concerns that planning had, and the assembly then adopted those concerns, and it adopted it as a companion resolution, so that even if 59 was adopted and no longer required the site plan review, 156 now requires them to have that addressed.
Close the loop.
Yeah. And then, so on the 26th, AR 59S will come on the consent agenda to have the administrative site plan provision removed. You've already still adopted 156, which still takes on that concern. And 57 will be as 14F.
So, yes, I think you had one copy of 156, correct? Oh, you have more? Okay, very good. Thank you. So it'd be good that we do our homework to make sure that we're clear on this. I think that, as was addressed, I think Mr. Coffey adequately summed it up. It's certainly needs, with the law department and planning department, we, if you will, close that loop. Chief, you had a question or comment? Please.
Mr. Honerman, thank you. Maybe all this is known by Mr. Coffey or planning or you guys, but as I sit here listening to the discussion, I've got some questions in my mind that the answers to which would help me determine whether I even have a dog in this hunt. This may not be a police and public safety thing, but I am curious about something, and I'm hoping that in this more or less work session sort of environment, I might have the opportunity to ask some of those questions.
Sure.
So I've heard that the cart, if you will, maybe that's the wrong term, may be serving people inside, maybe serving people outside that are on foot, maybe serving drive-through people. So I'm wondering how that relates with the service of alcohol. Or is it going to be a drive-through, you can order a beer out of the window? I mean, I don't know if you can or not. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I'm just wondering, trying to get my mind around it. And if people go in and on foot and get their beer and their sandwich, do they walk out with it? Are they going to be allowed to drink in public? And then since it's a cart, I don't know, and I have nothing against this location or these people. As far as I know, we don't have any problems there. But are we opening the door for like push carts? I don't know if the vendors that sell lunch at Town Square Park, will they be selling alcohol one day? And is that a good idea or not? You know, I'm thinking less about this particular spot than ramifications elsewhere. And then finally, I know I got marijuana on the mind, but if we're managing marijuana like alcohol and we're going down a road where we're consuming out of stands or providing and consuming in public, are we going to set ourselves up for an argument that we should be doing the same with marijuana? And is that good or not? I'm not weighing in on it all. I'm just saying that I'm seeing this larger peripheral issues here, and I'm not sure where we're going with it.
Mr. Trainee had a comment or question.
Mr. Coffey, as a resident alcohol expert, if I pull up to this, and you're an expert at this, I've known you for years. If I pull up in my car, can I order a beer out of this cart at the window?
No. It all comes down to the concept of the licensed premises. So that's where your control and the ABC's control comes in. You're not allowed to bring alcohol onto a licensed premises, or you're not allowed to take alcohol off of a licensed premises. So, first of all, they couldn't dispense it from a window, because you'll never agree that a drive-up window is a licensed premise, nor should anyone. But if you have, for example, a deck with a fence, which many brick-and-mortar places have it, and it's designed so that alcohol is confined to the licensed premises. And so the concerns about those things are just not going to happen. The concerns about the inside-outside aspect, we're going to have to comply with the new code. It says no seating. So that's just going to be the law here come a few short months from now, and so there can't be, unless the law has changed, of course, but what I'm saying is if no seating is permitted, but public access is, as it has been, then that's a different thing. So I don't know how it would all work out, but I would not be concerned about removal of alcohol from the licensed premises. You'd be on them, and the ABC board would be on them, and Chief Mew would be on them.
So this strikes me, and I want to kind of revisit this, because I think this is something that we obviously need to tell our colleagues on the body. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm really appreciative that we have, for lack of better terms, this little discussion with the work session. It's an agenda item, and it's important. They had the oldest salmon bake below the courthouse. It was outdoor, and it only operated during the summer months.
Yes.
And then they had canopies, if I'm not mistaken. They actually had seating on like picnic tables and benches and such. I can't remember, did they have alcohol?
Yes, they did, and they had a designated area which had a fence around it. And so you had to be 21 to enter, and you could there, at that point, they didn't serve wine, they served beer. And at that point, you could eat your food and acquire a beer inside the designated premises, even though it was just a portion of the parking lot. They had to get approval, and they had to make it secure so you couldn't hand beer out and stuff like that.
Could and I'm going back in memory, under this concept here, could I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. But basically, can I come down and just buy a beer or a glass of wine?
No, you're required to be, it's food service. And so it's not, for example, you and I go in there and I've had lunch and you want lunch and you're going to have a beer and I'm going to have a beer. Now, that would be legal but it might not be permitted under whatever your land use requirements are. So if you want it only with food service, you have the absolute right to do that, and they have to follow that requirement.
We just crafted into our document to require food service before alcohol could be utilized. We've done that before with our careers.
I do remember a liquor store that used to have a drive-up window right across from Chilcoot's.
Called the Saberjet?
Yeah.
I'm well aware of it.
I remember it.
A client?
No, it was where, when we were 18, 19, or 20, they were very good at selling alcohol to minors.
Yes, they were.
A friend of mine went in one day to get a case of Oli. They were out. He came running out and said, "They are out of Oli." I said, "Well, why didn't you get something else?" "There's other kind of beer?" I won't reveal his name. You all know him very well. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. Anything else on this subject?
No.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda, I'm sorry, Jamie? Ms. Hunt?
The one AR 156, the way Julian and I drafted it, on section 4, it asks the committee to make a recommendation and guide the Anchorage Assembly on whether the Assembly should allow alcohol-related land use for mobile food vendors and also for Connex units. So I don't know if you want to address that or not, but that's what that document says.
Well, then, and we need this before it comes before the body, correct?
Right.
So do we have a recommendation from this committee? Even though it's only... I'm thinking that, well, you're the one that sent this to our committee, Mr. Chair.
I know.
Yes.
Is this matter closed, or can I?
No, please. Come to me. Chief.
Just from a public safety standpoint on some of these that you need to consider when you're looking at this is where does it stop? So next is the deck, and then the awning over the deck, and then is it going to be sprinkled? Does it have to meet all the fire code standards? Does it have to meet the occupancy standards? Whether there's seating or interior standing room only, or do they add another connex where the people can stand at a counter and eat? So we got to take into consideration if they're going to be a mobile unit and they can move it around, that's one thing. But if they start adding and just adding wheels and tow capabilities to the front of this and adding on to these, like you were talking earlier, you've seen homes made out of these connexes. So we need to take into consideration, or I'd ask that you take this into consideration when you're thinking about this and discussing it, that where to define it very narrowly, if you're going to allow this, and where it stops and where it starts, and also where they have to start meeting certain safety codes, such as fire safety codes.
Thanks. Good points. Can I ask either Mr. Weaver or Ms. McConnell if you'd come back, please? I think this is, I'm looking at this as, I think we can craft a recommendation. I'd like the word either. If what Mr. Coffey says, and Mr. Trainee agreed, if this body could agree to conditions, conditional use and the conditions, and make it very narrow and expire it after a year or 6 months or 18 months or whatever, could that be done in such a way that would make your department a little, I guess, less uneasy about how that works? And for instance, we may ask them to remove any amount of stools or seating inside that little foyer area where you can go inside and order, like a Benny's Food Wagon.
Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest is you sequentially fix the ordinance that needs to be fixed for processing first, so that we can process these administrative site plan. And then if this came back to us with a changed site plan, we would give it its consideration. And it's new territory with respect to the beer and wine on the outside. If it's not being served inside, there'd be no seating. I'm assuming that's the way they would change that. Is it that in the public interest to allow that carte blanche downtown on maybe in a situation with standards of some kind? Because when Mr. Coffey talked about those other facilities, they had fencing, they had, that when alcohol was served outside the facility, there were provisions that were imposed on the conditional uses. So some standards for that. We haven't looked at that, but I would say that you sequentially fix the code to allow the administrative site plan review to come first, and then we can look at their new site plan and make those kind of decisions, and we'll do that internally with the other departments.
Okay. And I'm going to be the devil's advocate here on the other side of it and say, here's a guy who's already submitted a site plan review, and of course you originally reviewed it and said, yeah, it's okay as a food cart, and then all of a sudden now it changes a bit, and then we find as a review of that, the code is a loop, and so we now fix the loop. I guess my point is that at what point does this, how far down the line does this applicant have to start over, if you will, with a new site plan review?
Well, Mr. Holman, I'd like to clarify that he's no longer in compliance with the mobile food cart requirements. So he's no longer a mobile food cart. So I think that's where this confusion happens. Are we trying to create something that's kind of halfway between a mobile food cart, which is exempt from building permitting, exempt from fire permitting, exempt from all of those things, and a structure which has to get all those permits? Are we trying to create something between those two? That's what this is about.
The way I was looking at it was to go back and have it operate as a mobile food cart, maybe with some ancillary activity outside, if that's what they wanted to do with perhaps a beer and wine. And we haven't reviewed one before, haven't thought about it before other than this particular one, because this is, their site plan, I believe, showed some picnic tables outside that wasn't clear on their application, from my recollection, as to what kind of service would be, what kind of, whether the beer would, the beer and wine would be consumed outside that facility. I'm not sure that was clear in the application. And my point is, I'm in the application to exactly what the applicant wants to do, and then we would, take it back through the system administratively, unless the assembly decides they want to do it in this review. And if you do decide that, I suggest that you make sure you have a current site plan to know the implications of what's going to occur there, and any mitigating conditions that you might need to impose.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? I'm going to just suggest that we recommend recommend to the body from this committee that the ordinance to, if you will, close the loop, being it's 2015-57, that ordinance be recommended be adopted, and that further, with the modifications, and that the applicant 2015-59S be reviewed to the body for its review and suggested amendments. So my point is, Mr. Flynn, who actually contacted me about this particular application, wasn't real clear at the time, and he wanted some more input, and that's one of the reasons why it was pulled at that time and postponed. So
Did you ask him what his opinion on this was?
he was not committed, but he said that he was interested in this. He knew of the loop, if you will. He wanted that adjusted, but I have not heard lately as to whether or not he's in support or not. He was okay with the concept, but he was concerned about the actual policy of the process.
We have a couple days before the Assembly meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
If you want to make
Mr.
that
Weaver?
motion, I will, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to let you know that Assemblymember Flynn did contact us and ask us to draft an ordinance that would prohibit alcoholic sales in mobile food carts.
Okay. I was not aware of that. Well, I make that recommendation from the committee.
You going to second that, Elvie? Okay. Want to vote on this?
Sure.
There's only three of us.
Okay.
Mr. Honan?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr.
Got to
Chairman.
come to Assembly for approval anyway, ma'am.
No, but I just would like the motion to be restated for clarity, please.
Mr. Honan, you're in to restate your motion.
Thank you.
That we recommend that 2015-57 be adopted, and that the applicant under 2015-59S be referred to the body for its review and/or modifications.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Honan voted yes, Ms. Gray Jackson voted yes, I'm voting yes on that, so that's done.
So if you'd reflect that that's what we're recommending to the body.
Mr. Weaver, when are you going to have that document ready for Mr. Flynn? It's coming in front of us on Tuesday, so
We could have a draft document by then.
I just wanted to let you know the timeframes.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have one other item, and that is smoking in the parks. And so we had some folks here. I know Ms. Villamedias is here. There's some other folks that were on T-BOP, I believe, at the last meeting. And Sherry, do you have who it is that we're working with? Who's here for the smoking in the parks? T-BOP.
Yeah.
Come on up. Thank you. Just state your name so we can all know who you are.
Sure, my name's Steve Rafuse. I'm a park planner with Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation Department.
How do you spell your last name?
R-A-F-U-S-E.
Rafuse, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I guess I could provide a little bit of background.
Please.
So with the last T-BOP meeting, the topic was brought up whether there was anything prohibiting smoking in playgrounds or in parks. One gentleman made a comment about he was at Campbell Creek Park and somebody was there with their kids and walking through the playground smoking, and he was just asking us and asked the department whether there was something that was prohibiting that. And so I just did a quick review of municipal code just to see what the language is and if there is any prohibition to that. So in terms of prohibition of smoking, Title 16, Chapter 65 speaks to that. And the closest thing that would really be reflected in a park, I mean, that primarily speaks to enclosed areas. It would be number 7, seating areas. So prohibition of smoking, and it says seating areas of outdoor arenas, stadiums, or amphitheaters.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Did you look at the secondhand smoke ordinance too? We added something into that ordinance relative to smoking in public.
Okay, and what ordinance is that?
You'd have to look it up. Legal could tell you, but it was our secondhand smoking ordinance.
That comes from the secondhand.
Okay, so that is part of that, yeah. That came from the secondhand smoking ordinance.
Okay.
So, Mr. Rafuse, is there a recommendation based upon your review and research?
Well, just a further review, I'll get to the recommendation in a second. A further review of Title 25, which is basically public lands and park regulations. It doesn't speak to smoking or secondhand smoking in parks. And so in terms of parks and closed areas, any recommendation to basically enforcing no smoking or secondhand smoking. Since Title 16 speaks to enclosed areas, I guess shelters and playgrounds would be the closest things that we have. I think it would be difficult to make a recommendation to include language to prohibit smoking because as the Parks Department really doesn't have any enforcement capabilities or capacity. And so we could put up no smoking signs within our parks and on our trails, but there's really little we could do beyond that without perhaps placing a further burden on APD.
Chief? Thank you, Mr. Rayfuse. Any questions, Mr. Rayfuse?
Mr. Hahnemann, I'm going to open a big can of worms. This suggestion came about a year ago from the SROs who were trying to manage Town Square Park, who suggested that a no smoking ordinance, at least for Town Square Park, may give them a really powerful tool, because that was one thing everybody on the radar screen had in common. That idea hasn't gone anywhere. I'm not sure that it's something the public would support or the Assembly would support, but it's out there. I had not heard about a notion to ban it in all parks. I hadn't really thought about that. Of course, if that's boy, if everybody called APD or everybody called dispatch every time they saw somebody smoking a cigarette in a park, that would have an impact on us. But it makes me wonder if there might be a surgical way to do it in certain places and certain parks by name and not other certain parks. Maybe that's one thing that could be considered. I don't know if it would get any support. I'm not even sure it's a good idea myself. I just throwing it out there because the discussion's been there in the past.
Anything? Ms. Gray Jackson, I think, has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a good idea, but to post signs, no smoking signs in parks, if it's really not illegal, to me, would not be the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee?
No.
So I think I would go this far, and that is, I agree with the chief that if we had a location in specific, like Town Square, or a location where an event is being held, I hate to say it, but it's like all age. Because if it's an adult, I think the adults are going to walk with their feet. If they don't like the smoking, they're going to leave. Whereas the kids may not, they may be there with a parent, may not be able to leave. So I think that if we could place it on event-specific or, as part of their permit for use of the park. So I know we don't have anybody here from the Parks Department per se, but if perhaps you could build it in their application that if they're going to have an event where there's children present, that they could perhaps put that as part of their application. I don't necessarily mean the posting of it, but that would prohibit it in the application for the use, because we have to apply to use a park for an event, right? Mm-hmm. And then so if we were to look at a location that might be of help to help clean out, if you will, a specific area where a common occurrence would be if there weren't a motivation to be there because they can't smoke, they'll go somewhere else. I could see where that might be. I think I'd be amenable to something like that, but I would be more inclined, earlier you mentioned like regulation or policy. I think if we were to put this as more of a policy or regulation on the rental agreements at events, I think that is probably the more appropriate. As for general purpose use by the public in a park, in a public place, I think that would be very difficult to do and definitely almost impossible to enforce. So, Mr. Trainee, do you have a comment or question?
Just a question. Why don't you check with Dennis Weider? If you look on item number 1, it says sports arenas. You could have a park declared a sports arena because sports are played there in parks.
Where's it?
That's Dennis Weider. On number 1, it says all enclosed public places. It goes on buses, taxi cabs, sports arenas, and other enclosed areas. Let's ask Dennis Weider to define a sports arena.
I think that's going to be a brick and mortar.
You never know.
I know. The amphitheater under number 7 would be more closely, I think. Outdoor arenas or amphitheaters would be more.
Ask Dennis Weider to look at that one again.
Okay.
Find out what he thinks.
Yeah, if you could get, I guess, a legal definition to see. I think, I'm just going to, again, go back to opinion, and it's just that, and that is, if you had it permitted for an event, I think you have more solid ground to say we prohibit it. But if you general person walking up to play with their kid and they start smoking in the park near the playground, I don't think that's prohibited. It'd be very difficult.
Well, let's ask Department of Legal to
you
interpret
go.
it for us. That's the way we have them.
It's a good idea. Thank you. That's our recommendation, yes?
Yeah.
That's our recommendation.
Okay.
Mr. Rafus?
Yeah.
And if they need clarification, they can send us an email. We'll help them guide that direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that clears the new business. At this point, is there anything on any of those items? Okay, audience participation. Is there anybody here that would like to address the Public Safety Committee at all? Anybody on any topic? Ms. Villamedias, I know you've been here patiently. Is there anything you'd like to address the Public Safety Committee on? No? Please. It's okay, anything at all. In fact, that's one of the things that we like to do is hear from the public in the areas of public safety.
Well, my concern is in regards to phone calls that I'm getting, has to do with the marijuana law and legislation and the rules and regulations, and I think everybody's a little confused. And I'm getting, and you, Chief, probably already know about this particular business. There's a business downtown that is called the Potluck. And what they do is they go in there and people from the public and they're smoking marijuana. It's not a place where they're selling it, but they said that it's a private club, so they're okay. So my question is, are we going by the smoking ban ordinance, or are we just waiting to do something different, or what are we doing?
Mr. Trainee, do you have an answer on that?
I have an ordinance coming forward that's designed to treat marijuana smoke as tobacco smoke.
The same thing, so...
Same thing.
The same thing with the private clubs and
Yeah.
all of that language. Okay, perfect.
I'll probably introduce it this coming Tuesday and hold a public hearing in 2 weeks later on it.
Okay, because my concern is there were shootings not too long ago, a week ago, at the Playhouse, supposedly the back parking lot. And this particular business is right in the same parking lot. So they're saying that now we have to deal, with not only the chronic inebriates, but the people that come out the bars. And now we have people that are actually inside different businesses. In this particular business, although they call themselves a private club, they're going in there and smoking. So it was just a concern that I had a few members that are calling me and saying, we're trying to be very proactive in this community, and this is not going to go well if we don't know what we can do. Thank you.
It should be introduced this Tuesday, public hearing in 2 weeks after that on it, Sylvia.
Okay.
Chief Mew, comment, question, input?
Of course, we're in the gray area here on a lot of this
Workout
stuff.
today.
Yes. HB 75, which stalled at the end of this session, dealt with...
As does everything else.
Yeah, dealt with the private club issue. That never got settled, so I don't know exactly how it will deal with it, but there are a lot of city attorneys here in the state weighed in on that, and I think we found some language in that bill that would work for the cities and the industry the new pro-marijuana industry could tolerate as well. And I think that there's also the opportunity for the local level to design rules about marijuana clubs similar to bottle clubs, how that's managed. Right now, though, it's all kind of up in the air as far as what we can do. And I think that if it is truly a private business and they don't let the public in, they check who you are, and they only bring you in. It's essentially like having a party at your house. And I think today, if there's no sales and it's not open to the public, I don't know that we have the tools to deal with it. Those tools might be present in HB 75, and they might be present in some draft ordinance work that I think the city attorney's been working on for a while. But right now, I think that's kind of where we are on it.
My question would be, how does that take marijuana out and put alcohol in there? How does that apply?
I'm sorry, repeat the
Taking
question.
marijuana away and using the same scenario you just said with alcohol, how does that apply to the
Well, we have a local ordinance that says you can't have a bottle club, and what we used to call after-hours clubs. And potentially you could have the same thing applying to marijuana.
So, and that's one of the concerns I think we've got coming. I do know of at least one small storefront in a business structure. I think 10 or 15 people pony up $100 a month each, and they rent this small place and they call it a cigar club. And it's just 20 people, and they each pay a portion of the rent, and they go and smoke their cigars and their pipes away from their spouses or whatever. They just have their tobacco club per se. But it's not a business, it's just a private entity leasing a space.
Correct. Well, the question's out there, and we don't have an answer for it yet. Are we going to make it legal or illegal? I don't think we know.
Thank you. You just muddied it even further. Thank you. It's clear as mud. Any other audience participation, comments, questions you want to address the Assembly? Chief.
I don't know if you're going to bring it up or not. I don't see it on your agenda, but there was a development today pertaining to the three strikes out law, and I was directed to give you a piece of information whenever you're ready for that.
And I see Chief Benning was here. He has a ledger of some sort.
Yeah, apparently the city just got a letter from the ACLU pointing out some problems they have with it. I understand Mr. Wheeler is already on it. He's reviewing the ACLU's position on that matter, and we'll have a response for you shortly. I don't know if we agree or disagree with what the ACLU has said. I haven't even read the letter yet. Apparently, they believe we're out of whack with state statute. That analysis is being done, and we'll have some direction for you soon.
Can you just explain what that whole concept is? You said the three strikes.
I'm sorry, that was the proposed ordinance. It's on your agenda for Tuesday, I believe, for public comment.
It's the last item for public hearing on the night, sir.
Correct, and it has to do with you ride in the ASP van 3 times in 1 year, you would lose for 1 year your ability to purchase alcohol in Anchorage.
The one that was addressed last Public Safety Committee meeting.
I had some early and unofficial, I want to say casual and unofficial conversations with the ACLU about the ordinance. We didn't have anything to give them yet at the time. I was just letting them know that the idea was out there. At the time, they didn't have any particular objections, but apparently having seen the actual text of it and thought about it further, they now have some things they want us to deal with.
4 pages of concerns.
Pardon me?
They have 4 pages of concerns.
Yes, I haven't read it yet, so I don't know.
Chief Benning, you've been setting patiently. Is there anything that you'd like to do to address the committee? I see you got a binder there. Look official. Okay. Anything else? Ms. Easley.
There's stuff that we brought for sandwiches, and please have one before you go or take one with you.
Please. Sir, is there anything that you'd like to address us with any further? You, yes? Is there anything more?
I'm here in support of
With it, right. I didn't know if there's anything further on the food inspection thing. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, this meeting will then be adjourned. It is 1:31.